But yeah, so as soon as as soon as they said she was playing the character, and I put two and two together and realized she was in Scout Pilgrim because I love that movie so much, I was like, okay, I'm in. I mean, and we're getting more Phil. We're getting more Phil Coulson
Yeah. Yep,
because
that's a good thing.
it's the '90s, and that's a great thing.
Yep. Yep. All right. Well, let's start to bring this thing in for a landing. Is there anything in particular that either of you guys wanted to bring up before we sign off here?
I would just say, something we were talking about kind of at the very beginning off mic. Just when you look at Thanos in the film and you look at Thanos in the comics, especially in the Thanos Quest comics, when he obtains the gems the second time, and kind of how he goes about it, and just the nihilistic malevolence that oozes out of him,
Mm-hmm.
it makes you wonder. So, what does it look like when a character of deity level power, who is everything that Thanos is not? And I'm not talking about Adam Warlock necessarily, but a character that is everything good, where Thanos is everything that is not good. What does that look like in terms of somebody possessing that kind of power? And it really, I remember when I was reading the comics again and watching the film, it really makes you think about, how do we think about God in relation to looking at an example of everything that he is not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting to, because as people, we sort of always do like want to have more control over our surroundings and the things that, don't seem to go our way in life. We're always looking for power in a sense. And I think it's a fantastic, privilege and a wonderful hope that we have as believers, that we know that the ultimate power over all of the universe rests in the hands of someone who is also infinitely good and infinitely loving, and as a father, I think what you said earlier, Rob, is so apropos. Like, our children don't understand what we are doing and why we do the things that we do as parents, and there is something about becoming a parent that really helps you to understand the heart of God more than you really can if you haven't, been, entrusted with the responsibility of shepherding a life in whose creation you had a part. And gosh, I know I was going somewhere with that, but it's so late, and I've been up since like 5 this morning. So,
Yeah,
you guys
I think
fill
I
in,
can
fill
pick
in
it up a
something.
little bit from there.
Good, go for it.
It's interesting to think about because, like, I'm just trying to think within the MCU. If we were to say there's a character that's the opposite of Thanos, it would probably be Captain America, right?
Yes.
And I just feel like, especially with the perspective that the secular voice that these movies are written with, if you look at Captain America, he would probably say that nobody deserves to have that power. Like, he wouldn't take the gauntlet.
That's very Gandalf of him.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to, the conflict that people have with the whole, the problem of evil in the world.
Yeah.
And not to just like, start going down that whole rabbit hole of, the problem of evil. But it's one of those things where, if I remember somebody saying to me, like, if you had all of the power that God had, you wouldn't do anything differently because you would also have all of the knowledge that God has. Right. Or assuming goodness, because like a lot of people think that, God doesn't act to prevent suffering. He doesn't act to give us the most beneficial, scenario that our lives could possibly have. And if I had the Infinity Gauntlet, I would snap my fingers, and instead of there being 50% less people, there would be 200% more resources.
Right.
So, why doesn't God just do that?
Yeah.
And, as believers, and like you said, as parents, it's not a question that's like, oh, well, it's very easy to see from God's perspective why he would not do certain things. Actually, I think part of it is building off of the comic book in terms of, realizing that compelled love is not love, that free will does have value to some degree.
Yep.
And, so there's some of that at play, but I also, I do feel like a lot of the time we're looking at the universe through a keyhole, right?
Yep.
And then we're criticizing the creator of that universe in terms of how things are set up and why they couldn't be better.
Yeah.
Right. So we don't have the whole picture. And, if everything is restored, if we are able to trust that God is faithful, and I mean, there are lots of reasons why we would be able to, because he rose Christ from the dead, right? But if we can trust that God is faithful in all things, then he'll be faithful to restore all things. And at that point, are we going to look at all of this and say, well, that was really unfair? Or will we see it with that greater perspective in terms of, that's what it cost to get everybody to this point? So, perspective and free will and those two things are things that combat that for me a little bit. But, I think that the power of the Infinity Gauntlet begs the question. And I don't think it's a question that they're necessarily prepared to deal with in the MCU.
I don't think so either, because I can't see any sort of... With the way it's set up right now, I can't see any sort of way for them to be able to bring in the level of cosmic entity that they need to in order to actually introduce characters like the Living Tribunal, or even, God himself in the Marvel Universe, the one known as the One Who Is All, or the Almighty. At least in my experience, he's never seen, he's only ever referred to, and a lot of times that's only by the Living Tribunal, which we've never seen and may never see.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, anyway, it is time to bring this in for a landing. Like, I really appreciate the conversation, and I think we came to some pretty interesting conclusions here. As always, we are going to end up with a little bit of guaranteed good news, and this is a cool story from today, that there has been a sort of interesting advance in 3D printing technology that is they're working on basically doing the thing that they did to help Hawkeye at the beginning of Age of Ultron, printing skin. And here, it's in your backyard there, Rob. At the University of Toronto, researchers have developed a handheld 3D skin printer that can quickly manufacture fresh skin tissue that can cover and fill a wound in less than 2 minutes.
That's incredible.
Yep. So it actually, this is kind of funny. The device is shaped similarly to a packing tape dispenser, except instead of tape, it distributes tissue sheets made out of protein-based biomaterials, including collagen, the most abundant protein in the dermis, and fibrin, protein involved in wound healing. And the printed material can then penetrate all 3 layers of skin to properly heal the wound.
Very cool.
Yeah, so this is something that they would start using instead of skin grafts, which, have their own, whole set of problems. But we'll post a link to that in the show notes. We'll post a link to Geek Orthodox in the show notes. If you guys have been enjoying the show, you should definitely also check out Geek Orthodox because they're super cool. And
there will be more coming.
Yep. Awesome.
That is a vague promise.
A vague. All right, you heard it here. We can hold him to it now. He's on the record. But Rob, seriously, thanks for coming, and I genuinely hope that we can have more conversations with you as time goes on. Maybe we can have you back to talk about some of the indie comics that you got into, because with the bulk of because this is going to be sort of a new phase of our show as well, because we've been really centered around exploring all of these films of the MCU leading up to Infinity War. So we're going to start getting into just sort of different topics and having slightly less structured conversations. And if any of you guys have any input at all into what you would like to hear on this show, I would love to hear it. If you want to, ream us out and tell us that we're all stupid and wrong, then I would also be interested to hear those comments. You can get in touch with us on a variety of social media platforms. We're on Twitter and Instagram at 2geeksoup. The email address for us is 2geeksoup@gmail.com, and our Facebook page is 2geeksoup. We are recorded at Sound Mind Studios with production support by Lee Earnhardt. And even though it probably means that I am the grubby janitor, this podcast is a proud member of the More Than One Lesson faculty.